know if I don't know if headphones are super important. I wear them because I don't really have like speakers on this computer, but you don't really have to. You don't have to put on headphones. It's not bleeding.
Awesome.
Okay. Cool.
No, if you're good, I had my first Zoom last night.
Oh, really?
In 11 months, I've only stood off in the corner and made like hand gestures, like that's cool, or don't do that. Say no. 11 months later, the craziest hour on a computer possibly that I can ever recall. So
right. With
that, hit it.
No. Yeah, no, Kurt Heasley, thanks for being on the podcast, man. My name's Ruben. We got together because of Daniel Gill. I'm very excited. I've been listening to your albums all week leading up to this. Like, woo! I've actually been a fan for a few years now. Back in 2011, I saw the trailer for that documentary that was supposed to come out. Did it ever come out? Because I was trying to find it to watch it.
There is I think a citywide intention of bringing at least part of that story to completion in the Everything Wrong is Imaginary. But as of this point, we're in some really interesting times. And if it's not right in front of you,
right,
and it looks like the next step, don't go chasing things. Like things are coming so fast.
Right.
that I'm attempting to be more pragmatic around what's around me. And yes, like these reissues that were happening over the last 5 years for records that came out almost 30 years ago.
Right.
Because they were in such limited numbers, some less than 10,000 were made, some less than 5,000 were made.
Wow.
And so, like anybody who wants, like, I'll give you $300 for it. And then someone does it. And then the next person's like, I'll give you $308 and half a Snickers bar.
Right.
And so that investing in that time and process while doing everything else, that was the main, that's handling music business, handling manufacturing is a creative act for me. I have to figure out a way to make sense of it. And mostly in a world that doesn't make sense if I look too far out. But if I look at basically the puzzle in front of me, I'm pretty good working on it. So I've been focusing on my own puzzles, less on the macro puzzle.
Right.
Stop thinking about string theory.
Totally. So, okay. So are you reissuing this, or is there a label reissuing the three-way?
Lily's existed in these sort of idea pods of between 3 and 7 people, a variety of locations. Like in the, when I was a teenager and I was growing up outside of Washington, D.C., these people I met in record stores and at all ages shows who were also in bands. And I was, literally interested in sound systems. And, I'm like, oh, hi, I'm your sound man. And, at 17. So there was always something that I didn't understand that I was attempting to process. Yeah, part musically, but part, you sort of, teaching people songs, teaching people sounds, working with other people to make something, I guess, larger, to give it, to give this idea space in others. And it's not like there was a lot of permanence in anything.
Right.
In fact, I think the longevity of it holding my interest is a lot of the success is the success of the other people involved, which allows me to sort of focus on how it, basically, people are bringing me all this yarn, all this ideas, all the wool.
Right.
And I'm just constantly, so I'm not really tending to music. I'm just sort of assembling the music in the moment. I don't know if that sounds really crazy, but so, it really does. Like, no matter how much I would write songs, and the first 3 or 4 years, I was still very much transitioning from playing bass and drums in bands to playing, guitar and singing. But the guitar I was playing was all in open tunings, like the Bee Gees or Joni Mitchell or Sonic Youth.
Right.
And that's really weird for, straight edge punk rock, Fugazi DC.
Right.
Which worked to my benefit because it was obviously one of these things is not like the other. And the other important, people playing music and working at the record stores, Mike Shulman from Whirl and Black Tambourine, Archie Moore from Velocity Girl and Black Tambourine, who plays guitar on the first Lilies album, so I think there was a joke in 1990, 91, like, oh yeah, DC, those 6 people and their 12 bands.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that's also the vibe in Santa Barbara. Like I live in Santa Barbara, California.
Cool. No, totally. That's amazing.
It's just like the same. Everyone's in everyone's band,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, it beats sitting in like, a practice room. It gets you thinking musically. It gets you thinking about all these, these fundamentals. And the more you do, if you're learning your version of music, you can do the same outstanding tricks with half the effort over a few years. And he makes it look so easy. It's like he's been doing that every day for like 3 hours a day since he was 16. Of course he makes it look easy.
Totally.
And I think and it's so one, it facilitates a physiological need to connect with other people. Even if you're really not talking, playing music together is an intense form of connection and collaboration. So there, you're lowering your doctor bills, you're lowering your hospital visits, unless you're totally doing it, I guess, sort of in a gladiator way. And then you're always sort of seeing the doctor. Wink, wink.
So I guess
I have a chiropractor now.
So I guess to go back from the start, like, where are you from? Where were you born? Do you have siblings? Like, how did we get to the Lilies?
There's like a very simple East Coast trajectory of, my dad was working on radar arrays, satellite arrays from the 50s and 60s. And when I was born in Florida and in West Palm Beach. And a couple of years later, the RCA computers division he was working for closed down, and we moved to Hopatcong, New Jersey, where he was working at Bell Labs. And then a couple of years after that, we moved to the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. And he, anywhere there was radar, satellite information,
right,
whether it was for airplanes or communications or ships, that's where his work was. So we were in all these places where mathematicians and engineers. And in 1980, my dad moved to Fairfax County, Virginia, which is about 10 miles outside of Washington, D.C. And I sort of split time between Southern Virginia and Northern Virginia. And by the time I was, in seventh grade, 12 years old, there were all ages shows in 1983 that you could go to in Washington, D.C. And so I was strangely large for my size. When I was 10 years old, I hit a growth spurt and was 6 foot tall.
Wow.
By the time I was, so I was playing hockey, and they're like, hey, no, you can't have this big kid in the Pee-wees. They're like, no, he's 12. They're like, that looks like an ammo, long hair coming out my helmet. And it was very, there were two Swedish brothers on our team, and they thought I was quite interesting, but everyone else was a little like, whoa,
they thought you were an adult.
That's a lot. Right. No, they did. And taking the bus and the train and basically learning how people who were developing and researching ideas and producing and managing ideas, and people who were, DC is in the 70s and 80s was a little big city.
Right.
And there was all the infrastructure of like a high functioning town, but there wasn't the danger of like Chicago or New York or downtown Los Angeles, where you could wind up in someone's trunk, and just like, and I don't know where my child went. And there was something, the amount of security around the embassies, around the government, made it so if you were a 6 foot tall 13-year-old who wanted to go to the Hung Jury pub to see a 3 p.m. show on a Sunday, I just told my dad, I'm going out, and then come back at 11 at night. And, and so it started early. So did the practicing instruments. And
when did you start playing music, and how did you get into it?
I started singing when I was 5, basically in first grade. They're like, man, this kid's really loud. And so they were working, just on like the end of the year school play. And I sang. So basically from singing to, I was studying percussion and drums in a school ensemble, all the while keeping on working on theater. So I would always, there was, I did a lot of really strange plays that were probably inappropriate for little kids. Midsummer's Night Dream.
Yeah, that's a
for
weird
9
one.
years old. You're just like, this is how the world should be. And so now now I love Devo. It's, my favorite song is Gut Feeling. I love, Midsummer's Night Dream, Julius Caesar. And now I guess before I moved to DC, the first, to Fairfax County, the first time, I had become really enamored with the paraphernalia around the Sherlock Holmes series.
Right.
the posters from, so I would trace the posters. So I got really into early 20th century graphic design by so you can see how all these really weird pieces
are coming together.
And then honestly, I got my first acoustic guitar and a couple of lessons when I was 9, but I didn't like I didn't like nylon string classical. It was a little too demanding. And I played the nylon string guitar, and I would play piano, and I would play, snare drum, but it wasn't until I was 12 that a little, Gibson Les Paul Jr. copy from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. I learned how to, turn the stereo into an amplifier, and we had a reel-to-reel machine that we would make into a delay. I mean, it was dangerous because all of the parents in our neighborhood worked so much. We all, everyone would eat at each other's houses, and then we'd go into the basements and play Dead Kennedys records. And it's like, have you heard? I mean, it was really strange.
You guys were you were the loud house on the block,
We were. I mean, I remember years after, I was much older, and I had gone back to the house in Fairfax County, and I saw the neighbors across the street, and they're like, "Oh, it's so good to see you." I'm like, "Oh yeah." They're like, "I remember when that day that we're driving down the street and we're like, there's a concert happening."
Mm-hmm.
And they looked, and they could just see, we were just set up in the living room with no idea, a full band, how loud.
Right. And
all the neighbors were like, if they go to, they'll tire themselves out. And it's true. And we figured out, all of these important steps, and, they're like, yeah, I mean, sure. They're into, noise music, and, these weird, like Einstürzende die Neubauten. And I mean, and it was a lot. It was a lot for them to process, because it's a bunch of row houses in Virginia. Right. And for some reason, it was that it never got dark. It got loud, but the scene, bad kids, things never started, nothing bad happened. So I guess no one tried to stop us at first, which I think this is how a lot of people, they don't know not to stop. So I kept going. Right. And, honestly, I didn't have the focus and ability to finish public high school. And because I was spending a lot of classes, especially a first period, in the library. I had about a third of the school year. I think there was 42 unexcused absences.
Right.
And they're like, "Hey, we can't pass, they're like, it doesn't matter what your grades are. We're going to have to fail you for attendance." Mm-hmm. And something about that. And then basically turning 16, and friends of mine that I had been seeing at music stores, record stores, shows, museums, having like meals and at their family's house. One of our friends said, "We got a small recording studio in the basement, and if you want to just, basically work here, you can live here, rent the room." And so, I basically started on a series of institutionalized recording mentorships. So, right. I mean, the last couple of years of what most people would be in high school for, I was, in this strange, cobbled together.
So you're out of high school
vocational.
at 16, 16, 17, 18, you're interning at a recording studio where most kids would be finishing high school.
Most kids would be finishing high school, and by the time I was 18, I had a job. Wow. I had moved around to a few different places, a little while in Richmond, Virginia, a little while, like wherever there was like a cool scene. And in Richmond, Virginia in 1988, with Gwar blowing up, there was all of this energy. Back in DC in 1989, Fugazi has just put out, the EP,
right?
And they're just doing these shows. I mean, it wasn't, maybe you could compare it to New York in the late 70s, right, with like the Ramones starting to make sense, and there was just this. If you are organized and if you know what it is that you are meant to be doing, of all the things that make things successful, connections matter most. Being able to look out for each other, being able to, really, to be able to improvise solutions together. Because I think at that point, the recording industry had really taken advantage of the power of drowning out the competition through marketing, through noise, through advertising, what people called payola. Right. They're just like, they're never going to play your record because they're getting paid to play these records. And it was still funny because, when radio stations, were for the majority independently owned, because you couldn't own multiple radio stations in a market. There were laws against that before 1996. And, there were some of these states had a couple major stations, and the ability to hound a station to get them to play your 7-inch was possible. And, right, and I think that is one of the, how do you meet people? Well, you find the person who knows people and you get to know them, and then you get them to basically see you as an extension of them. So right, it was some really weird, like maybe not even quid pro quo, because there's, when you're just starting out with an idea, it's more like you find the person whose ideas, maybe not what they do with the idea, but the ideas themselves, you find the people that energetically are on the same wavelength.
Right.
And you basically wait for an opportunity and you listen. And if they ask you a question, be prepared to answer. Like, I have a record right here.
Right.
I probably should grab a 7-inch prop. And so it moved from working at Tower Records, working at clubs, playing, without a television or a computer, I had lots of time to write poems and, and play my instrument. And that didn't really, it really only got under control to be less than a 12-hour a day thing. I mean, I was pretty old, maybe 33.
Wait, you were 33 when?
When I finally learned to organize my time,
right,
to practice, and then take care of myself.
Right.
And then, it was like I was, I was a little intense, and I think I would burn people out because I was all quest. I would never rest.
Right.
I would just be, and that it's, that kind of mania, being that maniac when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 is cute. Being that maniac when you're 29, 30, 31, 32, you're like, okay, that's a little off-putting.
Right.
And yeah, I remember just saying, oh my goodness, the secret ingredient isn't that these other artists are brilliant. I mean, well, of course, there are much more brilliant people than me, but that they know how to take care of themselves a lot better than me. And I mean, I'm not saying that I am the worst, but I was really naive about what a human body, what a human life needs every day, including sleep, including water, including food. I mean, seriously, I'm like, rules are for suckers.
Right.
No, you're going to break something. And yeah, like,
well, so how many sleepless nights are we talking about? Like, and like, what does this like blend into when you're touring? You can't sleep either. Is it insomnia or what is it?
It's not. You know what it is? It wasn't insomnia. It was the ability to sometimes go to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning and then wake back up in a few hours.
Yeah.
And I would be rested enough to function, but not well rested enough to have, creative balance. So there's a lot of jags in the recordings because you can tell where the idea starts and then it's like, whoa. And it's funny because it's what makes the recordings unique. And I wouldn't say they were wrong, but I see like, whoa, that could have been so much more had I have had the patience, because that's the one thing when you're feeling that we can do this, when you're your cheerleader and the conductor, it's a weird, schizophrenic, what Robert Anton Wilson would call a good writer's job is to be able to explore that controlled schizophrenia, to be the characters, to be the narrative. And I was able to do that, but I didn't have the tools really to be able to recover and do it again the next day. And like I said, I started kind of living my own character, living my own myth. Right. And that's what got exhausting, and being able to catch myself rather than double down. You just need help. Yeah, come on. You're not wrong. I think there's the quote, if you think the same way at 45 as you did when you were 25, you've wasted 20 years or whatever. And that was, I did at that halfway point between 17 and 33 and 33. And, it's like, I'll be 50, in August. And it's like to understand that part of the interest that I have in what's going on in our, the towns like DC, the towns like Norfolk, Virginia, and Virginia, these places that are, they're talismanically powerful for me because it's multiple generations to create a culture, and the culture makes specific buildings and roads and infrastructure to serve them and their environment. And those changes weren't really fast for thousands of years. Like, things didn't change as quickly as they have begun to change over the last 30 years.
Right.
That, and, part of it is how our ability to design machines and what we want out of our lives. And I think that having an interest in being the other side of, first I was making things, now I use what has been made, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Like, it's like now it is our time to make sure these venues, these music stores, these, libraries, these museums that make people want to be better people around each other, if that makes any sense.
No, totally. It's these art institutions that build up the next generation, like a record store,
exactly.
like a library.
No, but
Yeah.
but that model,
Right,
is so and
a safe space for you to be able to create and to absorb art.
right,
Yeah,
and to fail, and
to fail,
and to learn to laugh at yourself, not to have it be a fun part of the process.
right.
And yeah, again, that the people who are driven to be the top are a very interesting, mind. And I guess whether like that, I didn't want to be a guitar slinger, or right. that there was this basically this larger institutional world at stake that I was playing for, that I was more interested in people having a sense of humor about trying to work together, making mistakes, looking at the mistakes, realizing they're just as important as the accomplishments, and then moving on with that information. And, I a little bit of what I was talking about is, yesterday was that when I would get a cassette tape that was a mix from someone, or a CDR that was a mix from someone, or the mixes that I have made people, that those over the last 15 years have gone on to SoundCloud. She had discovered Lily's records on YouTube.
Right.
And it's really interesting because I think people are just because they can say anything without consequence, that there are people realizing the importance of what they say, that these ideas in the libraries, in the museums,
right,
in the concert halls, that energy has mass, and that mass of energy has the ability to change things for the better or the worse. They can create solutions. They can end opportunities. And I don't think anyone knew that before 2008.
Would you want to be a young musician right now in 2020, 2021 with social media, with YouTube? Do you think you would have thrived in this environment, or were you happy to have come up in the 80s and 90s?
I actually, part of me, as I understand myself, with all what YouTube is the great equalizer.
Right.
You can watch the very, 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 very best writers, performers, stage productions. And if you don't take the time to put yourself at that Ray Charles level, at that, the Rolling Stones level, and I think information is so humbling. I didn't have a lot of information.
Right.
I was making it up because I wanted to connect, but I didn't I was 25 before I'm like, man, I need a lot more help. And I did. I mean, I went on a huge learning, deep dive. That's still, 25 years later, still ongoing, because I feel that because I could approximate, I understood systems, that what I was doing in 91, in, the first recordings, because I understood it, didn't mean I knew what I was doing. Didn't mean I knew what it meant, even though I sincerely believed it. But that's what happens when you find out what you didn't know, you didn't know.
Right.
And one of the things that...
What you didn't know as far as being in a band or being a well-balanced person?
Basically about creating a canon of work. I was it's not like it's a huge body of work. It's not like there's it's not like Frank Zappa, who could write a record write and record and tour a record every 6 months. But that there was this urgency and immediacy, and working with some just unbelievably talented people who cared about what we all cared about. It's the scene that celebrates itself. The idea that we could go back and listen to, Lee Dorsey working in a coal mine, and then listen to the Devo version, and then put on, a My Bloody Valentine record in literally in a 10-minute window. That was the intensity of things in 1990, 1991. Then records like Loveless came out, Nirvana, Nevermind. Now the things that were forbidden and counterculture and the voice of dissent, now the left has become the center. So what do you do if now, that's a lot of hurt. That's a lot of wrong. That's a lot of suffering. That's a big demographic. And this is the comedian Bill Hicks. This is what happened. And so my whole, I think that I didn't know any better makes it, anyone who was a little more well-read wouldn't have even bothered doing what I did. Wouldn't have worked with the people I worked with. They were like, why would you want to do it that way? The risk of it even working is you're not even going to be able to finish it. I'm don't tell me. You can't tell me.
So is that when you're talking about the risk of recording an album like The Three-Way, or going into a brief history of Amazing Letdowns?
Well, honestly, though, my Harold Evans, Harry, is, drumming on In the Presence of Nothing, on A Brief History of Amazing Letdowns, on Exame the Photon Band, that the idea that we were working more towards that the inspiration that got those records, which were, to be quite honest, heavily influenced by things like the Nuggets box set, the Rolling Stones, the Byrds, there's this, of course, Kinks reference, this, Dave Davies worship, the ability to just understand. You want to know why they are so revered? They are that great. Mm-hmm. It's not like they never phoned it in. Each and every one of those even when each and every one of those songs were, were studies in craftsmanship, and, even when they were being a little mean-spirited, they were at least punching up, if you know what I'm saying. They were very much, a large influence that I think, because of the, do you like the Beatles or do you like the Stones? And, honestly, I was never a completist. I never had to collect. I had a few Beatles records that I loved, mostly not even all the way through. I had a few Rolling Stones records that I loved, mostly, but not all the way through. It was, like, I was searching for something, and certain pieces of music by certain bands, fulfilled that. And when I was attempting to bring an idea into some sort of, produced recording based upon what we were playing, based upon what I was feeling was possible. And I think that's one of the lessons. If you're not able to, if it's not about the sky's the limit, you could have anything you want. It's about what can you do within these very specific limitations,
right?
And not stop at really good. That we had to find a way, even if it was imperfect in the way it was excellent, that there was something about the performance, the tonality, the way it connected with everything, that we were able to say, stop, we're done, move on. And then, going back to the just me with the yarn and these people who were able to improvise and collaborate, and with basically with eye contact, compose with me, to be able to take conduction without me waving, a baton, and, basically sometimes playing, you wouldn't even think of it as guitar. You're like, I don't even know what he was doing. He was like kind of hitting it, but I knew what was happening.
Right.
And that's a way, and it wasn't like spending $3,000 a day in the studio for a year. It was more like, we're going to get in, we're going to go until it's right, we're going to sew it up and get out.
Right.
You do that record in 4 days, you do that EP in 3 days, you do that album in 2 weeks, so
we're talking about the big transition from A Brief History, which was more of your classic 90s sound, to the three-way, which is and the record before, which was really 60s inspired. And are you saying that there was pushback from that? They're like, what are we doing? We have this one sound and now we're transitioning our sounds completely. Was there pushback there?
There was obviously a little concern that I had gone, bankrupt Sgt. Pepper's,
right?
They're like, oh, now he's going to play all day and all the night, all day and all the night. And, I remember I maybe was 10 or 11 when the Pretenders version of Gotta Stop Sobbing. I'm just thinking of how the Kinks never stopped.
Right.
How, Rolling Stones songs never stopped. And I know people are like, wow, there's a lot more of this like Baroque pop. They talk about the Left Bank, which I loved, but it's not like putting on the Left Bank made me want to work on a record like Better Can't Make Your Life Better or the Three-Way.
Yeah.
That we were literally attempting to take these, weird industrial sounds and orchestrate them. Like, that was more of my intention than saying, let's go back and study. I was like, how do we make a record that comes from, this chaotic, noisy, 89, 90 rave culture, but make it sound like it was recorded in Paris in 1969. Right. That was the idea.
Is there some validation though? Because A Nanny in Manhattan is that 60s sound, and that song did really well for you guys. You guys played Top of the Pops. You were doing television. Like, was there validation there?
It was. That was challenging because, like, a lot of artists, that the airtime is purchased, and basically when Levi's wanted to do a commercial to sell their new white tab non-denim line, they hired, and made a big production out of it. And the director of the ad said, I want to use Nanny Manhattan. And in England and in Europe, sometimes before movies, they show ads. And there was this 90-second long ad before movies,
right,
that featured A Nanny in Manhattan. And it was that $2 million worth of airtime was purchased. And when people heard it, they're like, this doesn't sound like Third Eye Blind.
Right.
This doesn't sound like Oasis or Matchbox 20. What is this? It's like Granny's on the mixing desk.
Totally.
And I think that was a series of, I just kept saying yes, even though I wasn't sure what was going to happen next.
Right.
I wasn't, and we were not organized in a way with a business plan.
Yeah. Did you have a manager? Yeah. Did you have a manager?
No. And this is where we just eyes forward, just say, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. And, everyone over here is looking around like, I don't know if this is going to be okay, man.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we going to do? Like, we'll hire people. They're like, do they know that? I'm like, absolutely not. Nobody says anything.
All right.
And that was the level of infiltration into mass consciousness. And you can't, I don't think you could do that without a level of adaptable sincerity. And in the end, I absolutely believed in what we were doing on all the records, all the different players, all the different affiliate bands. I mean, all of these bands that helped me keep growing, keep opening up to what was possible. And I think even though it never became a career, it became something that was nourishing and enjoyable. And it's real for me, for us, for Frontier Records coming in after putting out records that when I was a teenager, I listened to obsessively. And like that, if you can find a way to basically in the poker game, lose money the slowest.
Right.
Basically be the one until you can't lose. Basically just hang in the game and play to play. And I think a lot of what has happened in the last dozen years is a lot of people who were not exceptionally hot or talented 20 years ago didn't stop working.
Right.
They kept working, and rather than attempting to cash up or, go large, they just they just learned how to do their okay thing exceptionally well. And if a producer or a writer can take someone's idea and just like make it something, that's like magic. It's like, because it's about knowing who you are, knowing what you do, and doing it, unthinkingly, like a beast. Like it's your jungle that you're moving through, and you're moving through on purpose, and you don't go over the cliffs. You don't wind up in the pit. That's it.
Right.
And like I was saying, today, if I was 19, if I was born in 2002, I would be watching YouTube tutorials.
Right.
I would be reading and writing Wikipedia, and you know what I mean? Like, I would be soaking up knowledge in hundreds of languages.
Right.
Because
it's just because the information's out there to be had.
Exactly. And it wasn't when I was 15, 16, 17, 18. So part of the urgency was you can only, in theory, there's no difference between practice and theory, but in practice there is. So I was ready to get out and start dancing. But it's like, I think of,
and when you think of like touring back then too, like, how did you ever find information on venues, the book? Now it's like you just send someone an Instagram message and you can play a show.
There were a series of fanzines, college radio stations, independent labels, independent promoters, and everybody worked, from the first, major punk shows in the 70s, networks, the punk rock scientists versus the indie rock mafia. These people were literally saying, okay, your band has a new 7-inch. You can play an awesome 20-minute set. You're going to come with us to these 7 cities, and you're going to have to, sleep on couches and eat. The 4 of you will have to eat for $20 a day. But if you can do it, you're gonna understand what you need to be focusing on to take it to the album level. And I think part of the intensity of trying to get what people, when they talk about these records that, sound just like My Bloody Valentine.
Right.
Or in the 3 ways, like he wanted to get every idea in, like that sort of maximism was just, I didn't want to sleep on what I saw was the best ideas in the room. So I did everything I could to just leave it in. And like, if it meant staying up 16 hours, 36 hours, I'm like, we can keep going. Because in the end, honestly, those people, those ideas that were, I would do my part, and what people would come back with, shattered me, shattered the expectation. And I'm like, I hear that. I can keep going. I will keep going. And so, there was just like a lot of, when you get close to figuring out a mystery, when you only got a few puzzles, you may have been working for 12 hours, but if there's like 3 pieces in your hand and and you got 997 on the table, you're going to put those last 3 pieces in, because that's how we quest for a sense of purpose, a sense of payoff. That's That's our little dopamine addiction.
Totally. And
America runs on endorphins.
and to go back to maximism and controlled schizophrenic, you have a 7-minute song, Socks Hip. Can we talk about that song really quick? And the idea of like some songs are less than 2 minutes. Socks Hip is 7 minutes. Like, can we go into the process of even recording that song and the idea of having long songs and short songs?
Well, the idea, like, you know, everyone understands that Roger McGuinn, Gene Clark, Dave Crosby, the amount of rehearsal it took to play the first Birds shows, the amount of rehearsal it took to make those first, the Pete Seeger arrangement for Turn, 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 the Bob Dylan, Mr. Tambourine Man. Like, there was so much weight. There was so many heavy aspects that by the time you get to a song like Sweet Judy Blue Eyes for Crosby, Stills and Nash, now you've got the guys from 3 bands working together to basically make a 7-minute anthem.
Right.
And I wasn't looking to make a 7-minute song about the outsiders and about when the sort of bad guys take power and why things like, you know, JonBenet Ramsey's death couldn't be solved. I mean, I literally attempted to finish a thought and it just took a while. And I was looking to the Nat King Cole. I was looking to, you know, musical theater, you know, Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Totally.
I mean, this is, I mean, I'm like,
that song is an epic. It's like this, like, And all those components that from the time I was 5 years old were, you know, they were readily available for people with the patience to listen. And I think maybe that was one of the things that having the ability to be still and like be able to create something and then turn off all that creative juice and go into critical, analytical listening mode, deeply. And it's a really digestible song too. The melodies are so good, and it's like it doesn't feel like 7 minutes. I didn't even know the song was 7 minutes until I looked yesterday, and I was like, "Oh, that song is 7 minutes." Like, all right, well, it doesn't feel like it.
It took, I mean, and that was, you know, working every day for the better part of 3 years after, you know, basically spending 2 weeks a month in recording studios for 10 years, you know, it's not like I just said, oh boy, let's try to make something inaccessible. It was like, that was the first time there were people looking at Michael Deming, Aaron Spursky, Torben Pastore, me, you know, Seymour Stein, Risa Morley, you know, everyone, you know, like I was looking at it as what would Richard D. James do right now? He was the only other thing on Sire that I could look at and be like, this is the most relevant player in the game right now. What would he do? I'm not going to go back and start, you know, sample editing, or I'm not going to use, I started in that. I'm not going to, you know, so like I said, taking those, that noise, those textures, and attempting to get our people in the room to do that. Because he could do that. He could do that. I mean, and it's beautiful. Like he was bringing people the universe and I was attempting to let people make this universe, not about doing it. I didn't need to control it as much as birth it,
Right.
I'm like, I will be, if this all goes to shit, if this all goes wrong, I'll be the leader and I'll be the one to blame.
Yeah.
That was basically.
So structurally too, you were leading the structure of the song in the recording process. Like, did you do drums first, or was it guitar first, or how'd you orchestrate that one to the rest of the band?
Guitar, there was a guitar, drum. There were a lot of rehearsals. There was a guitar and drum pass. And then once we had this we went, and with sections just being counted out because not every section was played, Aaron Spursky was able to make one perfect drum track for each of the sections. And then I went back and I laid a slightly more focused guitar that wasn't as chordal. It was a little more broken up.
Okay.
But once you could hear the guitar and the drums, you could do bass. And once the drums and the bass were there, that final guitar and the final acoustic guitar. And I mean, we had enough people that we could play all the instruments, but we didn't in real time have the money to rehearse a band, to be our band while we conducted them, which was, I think, an option, but the kind of people we were attempting to get on board were very suspicious of our offer. And I get it. Now, the people that were on board were very glad. They were like, I don't know what this is, but I sure am glad that, I stopped by for 2 hours because this is some kooky shit, man.
Right,
like,
yeah.
You are seeing the rainbow, man. I'm like, life is short. Get the good stuff in first.
Totally.
You can always die in bed.
Yeah. So what kind of headspace were you in making the three-way? Were you listening to more 60s music, or were you just thinking this is the music I grew up listening to, so I wanted to incorporate it?
It was, I mean, honestly, yeah, I was listening to a lot of Pharoah Sanders, a lot of Mel Torme, a lot of Bob Dorough. I mean, I was listening to more vocal lyricists, vocalists. I mean, I love the recordings of, Doris Day. Right. I love the Monkees. I love Carole King. I love Neil Diamond. But I also would put on Einstürzende Neubauten, The Birthday Party, My Bloody Valentine. So it didn't really... we would put on, Cherie Cherie or Ghost Rider by Suicide. There's Suicide samples in the Zero Population Growth, the sort of the atmospheric, EP that we did sort of at the same time as the three-way. And if you can imagine like saying, well, what if all of that happened at once? I'm like, right.
It did.
I think that was the threat. They're like, I don't even know what this form of music is anymore. But without one person saying every day, do this, being the Brian Epstein, being the David, being basically cracking the whip at, El Gato Ranchero, like, hey, you're just running around. Be nice. Yeah. Get to work. because we were, we had bitten off way more we could organize ourselves. And because of A Nanny in Manhattan, I think there was this sense that we would deserve more, meaning that there would be more time, more money, more, just more.
Yeah, because that one, there was some success leading up to that record,
and then it just stopped. And honestly, and this is why, as a young person now, what happens when someone like Brian Epstein takes this sort of bar band and puts them walking in a row. Now, Brian Epstein was taking a pretty heroic amount of speed every day, and a pretty heroic amount of like sleeping pills every night.
True.
And then one night he didn't wake, the next morning he didn't wake up. So, but for every year, for those 5 years, he was raging with great ideas. And that's what we lacked. I couldn't be on the field and cheerlead at the same time.
Right.
And I could do it for the others to a degree. And I wish there was, I think everybody wanted to find a way to take the crazy hat off me. But if I didn't do it, there was no one to put the crazy hat on to, we could do this. And like I said, 5 years later, I'm like, I think I can take the crazy hat off. I think I got this. And that was cool, because what happens when you're forcing this personality of eccentricity and you start slowly expressing how you experience things, it's even weirder. And I think most people are looking to be unique and have a signature rather than the most lucid version of themselves that knows when the opportunity to strike appears. And so, that's honestly been
right. I think we've grown a lot as far as rock and roll, with idolizing people with mental illness. Growing up idolizing someone like Syd Barrett or Brian Wilson, thinking, that's where the magic came from. In reality,
that's the magic.
But they were just talented, like you. You're just talented. You didn't need
super talented
to live on this myth.
Yeah, and I feel like, speaking of Syd Barrett, speaking of Brian Wilson, what would have happened if they weren't attempting to force it with a crowbar? What if the need to compete brought them together rather than drove Brian harder, or made Syd Barrett want to be outside the power structure? I think a lot of his ideas are so relevant, and that people weren't thinking as fast as Syd Barrett drove him crazy, made him feel alone, until the point he was alone and you couldn't relate to it. Honestly, like, it's the practice and the ability to communicate those moments of awe. They're always writing. They're they're staying on top of what they need to be creatively. But when these moments of just like, how do you express it? You just document it the way it is, and you're already documenting. And I think what happens is, the expectation of infinite growth, of infinite stardom can drive you a little crazy. Right. Personal loss can drive you a little crazy. And just, honestly, dehydrating yourself, not sleeping, living on, pound cake. And you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I mean, you can really, like, I just live on starch and sugar. It's like, no wonder you're feeling crazy, man.
Right, totally.
We're going out for some like serious like Vietnamese hoagies or something. I don't know, man.
Totally.
In Ma, we need some watercress.
And so
Yeah.
did you have this also on top of everything else going on in your sleeping problems, eating problems, but like the fear of making it? Did you have that fear? Did you want that? Of course, everyone wants to be successful and have a career, but were you putting pressure on yourself in that way that like, I need to do something to compete with a nanny in Manhattan, like that kind of thing? Like, did you have that self-imposed pressure?
I hear what you're saying, and I always felt a little strange that the way we became visible, that we simply were not prepared to exploit our niche with that visibility. And no, I knew that there was no way to change what the contract with Warner Brothers was. I had no way. I mean, the only things that would have allowed us to grow, to have and it does come down to time and money, and money to hire the right people, because certain jobs, if you do them for a couple of years, you're burned out. Like you will like, I'm just going to go up to the mountain cabin. I'll see you in 2 years. I'll see you in 2, man.
Right.
And,
did you
and
burn
that's
out?
Okay. What?
Did you burn out?
Well, the incarnation of Sire Records at the end of the fourth quarter in 1999, Warner Brothers didn't renew their budget.
Right.
So every single contract that Seymour had was wrapped and done. It was done. And everyone who worked there, Lyle Preslar, was the general manager. He was a guitar player in Minor Threat. Mm-hmm. Seymour put this talent powerhouse around him. And then everyone got a form letter saying, all right, thanks, good night, I'm moving on. Because they're not going to fire someone as important and as visionary as Seymour Stein, but they will stop weaving rope. Right. And when the rope ended, our contract ended, and we had literally just begun a tour, a video. And, we were $10,000, $12,000 already,
spending
out of money, out of pocket, when we got the letter that our contract was complete. And I had beautiful kids, in the world economy, I had nothing to complain about.
Right.
Like that. What? Stardom? There was no loss there. I felt like I stuck the knife in everybody else, but it wasn't my knife. Like, how could I take away an opportunity that wasn't mine to give? And so again, I see these lessons. I see this, chasing celebrity, chasing visibility. Like, I'm not seeing a growth, a creative growth in artists that are platform dependent upon social media. I'm not saying there isn't interesting art, but I'm thinking of 21-year-old artists who started doing great stuff when they were 31. Right. I don't know. That's what I mean. Like, those are the people that I'm like, whoa, we need you. And I have my eye on a couple real killers, and they're moving. They're in the lateral parts of the architecture, like a virus of consciousness expanding,
right,
malware in this consumption cycle. That's social media. You need another brand, you need another sponsor, you need another product, you need a new brand, you need a new sponsor. Right. And like being the tour manager for the Grateful Dead in 1977. They're like, I'm done. That's it. I'm out.
I have a career. That was a career. Yeah. Yeah. I think the industry is so backwards now. It's like you have all these young people. They come in, they make one album. The industry hits them really fast. But then, like you said, there could be the 31-year-old who's like, oh, I'm writing my best stuff. But by the time I just hit 30, I'm about to turn 31. I feel like, oh, I don't know. Is this it for me? I don't know. But in reality, I could be writing my best stuff right now if I wasn't so afraid of life.
And that's the thing that, again, maybe they're not pop artists in the way popular music has come to depend on, like these call and response tracks, the diss tracks, the Max Martin songs, like that's what I need people to understand. Here I am worried about my peer group. And what was the biggest record in 1999? Hit Me Baby One More Time.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not like that was someone I wished success. I wished an Aretha Franklin trajectory on. Like, I'm like, yeah, finally someone who's not afraid to get up there and do it. Within a few years, I'm like, I hope she finds happiness and just backs out with the money she has.
Have you been following any of that Britney stuff? It's
honestly, no, I like I said, I don't have a lot of, I am interested, but I think, taking out my cultural telescope and looking at the movements and the cosmology of the stars and how they push and pull on each other. Honestly, the last 20 years, I just feel grateful to have been visible for what we were visible for, not for being like, thank God for Ginger, that people, if they want to listen to a Nanny Manhattan or Ginger or like, Will My Lord Be Gardening? They're just like, what? Wait a minute. This is all the same. Oh, it's this guy.
Yeah.
In that realm. These players come from here, then they go back there, and this is where they meet. And they make these little record boxes. And when it came time to like seriously, is this the most amount of good for the most amount of people? And I put some very specific requirements about records, about bringing people into a studio environment. And I've hit a couple of the criteria, but not all three requirements. And, last year I was like, wow, I think we're finally going to start production on a new album. Oh man, I don't want to say that. Scratch that. Shh. I didn't say that.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, from like the fall of 2019, Christmas of 2019, February of 2020, I'm coming back from California. I had just sat down, attempting to reestablish, a relationship and an accounting with Rhino, Warner Brothers. I'm like, there are some Lily's records on Warner Brothers that aren't available. And
so there's more albums that aren't online?
No, I mean, like a series of songs.
Oh, okay.
Like it was what is called the services for the soon to be departed. There's another single.
Oh,
and
okay.
So there's like another 9, basically a singles comp, singles and EPs comp. And here, and a month later, 2 weeks later, everything stopped.
Yeah.
And here we are. And I know it's like, oh, you got 2 records coming out. I'm like, but that was all put in motion years ago.
Right.
Like everything that we were working on 16 months ago is all like now. And it's like, hold on, hold that thought. I'm like, oh man, I put on like 32 pounds in 11 months.
Yeah.
We're gonna start a hike club, then like a little wrestling club.
Yeah.
And then we'll make the record. We'll be friends then.
Well,
like,
there is
no way.
Yeah, I just recently started getting back into the gym because I found out no one's going to the gym because everyone's afraid. So they're empty. So, you wear the mask and it's hard.
Yep.
It's super hard to run with a mask, but you get used to it.
You get used to it. Yeah.
It's good for the mental health as much as the physical health. So,
and you got it. That is the recipe. That is the one ingredient for inner peace when things get loud and they're not your problem. Because you see all these problems and you're like, that one. And if you really can see the playing field, you realize the majority aren't yours. And the one thing that is your responsibility is so far down the road that you are able to be in the right position, to take your stuff, to take what's important, and just move out of the way. And I'm not saying that because there are just, like great cosmological forces, things that all you can do is manage the retreat, avert disaster, avert loss by not doubling down, by you can't tell me. And I'm like, that's the worst advice. What do you mean? Like, no. Because that was what I would have done when I was 25.
Right.
You can't tell me. Yeah. Now mask up, hit the trail. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it feels good.
Because the opportunity will come around again. They may not be the same opportunities, but we are such, culturally as humans.
We have to adapt.
Exactly. The Pacific Rim in South America, up with the Lapland, talking to reindeer, adaptability is the common, 6,000 languages, some being spoken by less than groups of 40,000 people. And we're just starting to get close to real time. I like, we need your group's best thinkers on the Zoom.
Totally.
And we're getting, and I feel that no one's talking about that. Yeah. And that's kind of like, I'm like, oh man, this is a great idea. Everyone's ignoring it.
Right.
Sweet.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it, man. Well, man, we could
my one-arm push-up contest I'm working toward.
Well, we could let's start wrapping it up, man. What's the best way for people to support Lilies and Kurt Heasley? What's the best way for people to support you?
There's an amazing Bandcamp site, Frontier Records, Lilies Bandcamp. If they like streaming, there's pretty much across the board. Spotify, Apple, whatever your platform, we have hopefully adapted it. Mostly, I feel like people investing in their own self-care in their own neighborhood and making sure when shows start happening, there's really good people and really good places to come out, because this is, like everything, impermanent. It is not permanent, but we need to start behaving like the adaptable. We know we are.
Right.
So
when shows come back, like go to a show.
Yes.
Buy some merch at the show.
Exactly.
Like, even more so than you originally were doing. Like make sure if someone's got a restaurant,
someone needs a babysitter
right.
so they can go out. I mean, really look at these people and their quality of life, their ability to, what Andrew WK would say, party,
right,
celebrate, because we're all working. We all get tired. You know, we need that moment to just say, and it could be in the gym and it could be in the show. But what happens once we do that part of it is problems that aren't ours somehow don't catch our eye as much. And the one thing we need to be working on, we have an idea now. Like, I can do this. I got it. And then it goes back to the hustle, back to the groove, back to the work. And that's the thing is like, you know, I love that BoJack Horseman kept on saying he had ruined his life through these grand gestures. It's funny because I have said it differently, but I think we are waking up to the fact that we are the super people. Mm-hmm. We are the doctors, the nurses, the mayors, the presidents. We are the people capable of brightening the corner. You know, and I think there was always that's their responsibility. That's someone else's job. And you know, luckily enough, the last 4 years, guess whose job it is? Your job.
It's our job.
It's our job.
It's our job.
That's what happens when we let someone else do it. It don't get done. It's just not. It's just not done.
Very true.
I think he may have broke something. He broke my will to play. And I
Seriously.
don't want to play.
Right. Absolutely. Well, hey, man, thank you so much for being on.
And a great wrap up.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it so much.
Okay. Until next time.
Next time.
Be well.